Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the moon card, number 2, the High Priestess. So we are going to start with the Kabbalah, and this is the Hermetic Kabbalah. The moon is associated with the letter Gimal, or Gimel, which means, actually it has a few different meanings. It means camel, it means bridge, to nourish, and to wean. So all four of these meanings have to do with movement. Now, Gimal or Gimel sits between number 1, the crown, and number 6, beauty, Tippereth. And it is the first letter to cross the abysmal line. So here's the abyss. It is also the first letter to cross from the archetypal world into the creative world. And this is important because the High Priestess acts as a means of transference, as implied by the letter meanings, and also a keeper of law, a keeper of memory. So we're going to move on to the next card or image I'd like to show you guys. So this just actuates or insinuates the previous card that I showed you, just with a little more detail. So here we have the path of Gimal. Here's the letter. Here's the name, the High Priestess, and it is associated with the powers of the moon. So the astrological assignment to the High Priestess is the moon. The moon rules over Cancer, which represents duality, represents yin and yang. The sign of Cancer, if you pull it up or if you want to do a little extra research, you will see exactly what I mean once you look at it. Now, I'd like to point out one more detail in this card before we move on, is that the Gimel actually looks like a shoe. Again, insinuating movement. So what is actually moving is the spiritual powers in the one thing, or the crown, moving downwards into the creative world. And those of you that know the archetypal, creative, formative, and material worlds will know exactly what this means. So moving on now to the tarot. Here is the A.E. Waite depiction of the High Priestess, and she is sitting on a stone throne made of salt. Salt represents solidification. I'm only going to point out a couple of details here just to make the video quick. First, I'd like to point out her robe. It almost looks like water, as depicted right here. It looks like a waterfall. And as we talked about in the Kabbalah, that the letter Gimel, which is represented by the High Priestess, is coming from the crown, the number 1, the infinite source of all energy and power inside of the Kabbalah, inside of the one thing. So you could, into the creative world. So you could almost think of the High Priestess as the flowing conscious waters of spirit coming into physical form. And as her waters flow downward from the crown, they are creating a solidification in her law, in her scroll that she has in her hands. So the scroll represents memory. When we want to memorize something, we write it down and we try to go back and look at it to remember how we were feeling or how we were seeing something. So she is taking down the information from the mage. So as we talked about last week, the magician is associated with the powers of Mercury, which is a messenger. She is writing down the messages of Mercury, and solidifying them in her writing, in her scroll. One last detail I'd like to point out is Torah. We can just guess what that means. I mean, the Torah is the original Bible, the original quote unquote word of God. So she is taking down the messages and recapitulating them, rewriting them. Because she comes down from the crown, she is a reflection of the light, as two is a reflection of one, signified here. Now, two is a feminine number, and we're not going to get too much into that. If you know, you know, and if you come to class, we'll find out more. So here we have another high priestess. This one, you can see that the waters of the high priestess are more accentuated in a flowing manner. We also have a letter Bet, which is the house, and a Yod on either pillar. So as I said, the high priestess rules the sign Cancer, which represents duality. And if we keep looking here, we have dualistic pillars, we have dualistic fruits. Her horn diadem is also dualistic and periodic by nature as well. So this is the Manly P. Hall tarot key. It's a bit different. The high priestess is actually blind here, and that could be possibly because of the blinding light from Kether coming into beauty. It could mean many different things. And as you can see, Mercury, the sign of Mercury, is actually on her shirt. So this is implying that the moon and Mercury are so intertwined in how they operate together. She still is representing the moon here with the crown on her head. So moving on. Here we have another high priestess, and she is holding a lyre. So the letter Gimel in ancient Hebraic times, or thousands of years ago, was originally written as a bow. So a lyre and a bow are very similar in shape, very similar in the way that they function. Bows, they stretch out to shoot an arrow, and lyres are stretching strings to create music. In this card, you can actually see the one limitless light, the number one, the light from number one, or Kether, the crown, shining down into beauty, Tippereth here. So next we're going to look at the Aleister Crowley deck. And again, we have a bow or a lyre, which also could represent sound. And through sound is how we record, we take things in as memory, we understand the periodicities associated to sound. Everything has a rhythm, and music specifically has a rhythm. So last week when we looked at the Mr. Crowley card, we saw a graph with the magician. Here the graph is also again depicted, and you can see the high priestess kind of bending the graph, bending form, as she is a power that descends from the crown. She has the ability to morph and bend form. She is also the creator of, she's the first step into the world that is physical, because she is the first key to cross the abyss. So here we also have the moon, and we have Gimel. So we're going to move on now to the historic cards. First, I'd like to show you the Visconti Yale deck, and this is the first This is the first tarot deck that has been known to man in history. The first recorded tarot deck. This is not to say that it hasn't been been around before that, but this is the first surviving deck in history. Now, there are a few things that I'd like to point out here. As I told you earlier, the High Priestess is descending from the crown, the one thing, the spiritual source of our reality, of the archetypal world. And because she descends from the crown, she is a virgin. She is the virginal substance of birth. When we are born virginal. We are born pure. Her hand on this rope represents the veil that virginity offers, that virginity has. Virginity is a cloak to impurity. And her left hand is on the rope. When the rope comes off, she has become the maiden. Okay? On her dress here are yods. They could also be thought of as raindrops coming down from Kether. Okay? This is the moon card, or excuse me, not the moon card. This is the High Priestess from the 1400s, and we can still decode her mysteries. So she is wearing a type of crown, but it's not necessarily the crown that we saw in the original one, but she's still wearing a moon-shaped symbol here, and she's actually holding a moon. So we have basically a depiction of the High Priestess, just in a different form. Last, but certainly not least, we have the Marseille deck, and it was La Papesse. So we still have the scroll or the book, and a little funny story, and we're going to wrap this up. So there was a popess, and she is a legend, and she's called Pope Joan. Now, the High Priestess is supposedly Pope Joan, and Pope Joan disguised herself as a man for many, many years, and she went through monkship, and she became a priest, and she eventually became the Pope of the Catholic Church. Now, what actually created the schism where she lost her popeship was that she had a baby in the middle of the street while she was going to a church one day, and they immediately took the baby and they killed her. Now, the Vatican will not admit that Pope Joan actually existed. They tried to wipe her from their records. But the tarot expresses this Pope Joan, and the High Priestess is considered to be Pope Joan. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video for the week, and I will see you all Sunday.